Good morning. I'm Chandra Pasma, MPP for Ottawa West Nepean, an education critic for the Ontario NDP. I'm joined this morning by Karen Littlewood, President of the Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation, Tamara Witcher, President of OSSTF District 30, and David Sykes from OSSTF District 30. We are here this morning to request that the Auditor General conduct an audit of Ontario's provincial schools. These schools, which are under the direct control of the Ministry of Education, support students who are blind, deaf, visually impaired, or deafblind. These are some of Ontario's most vulnerable students, and yet, year after year, they have been forced to learn in conditions that no parent in Ontario would find acceptable. The school buildings are crumbling and in a poor state of repair. You can see some of these conditions here yourself, and ask yourself whether you would find these conditions acceptable for your children. There are serious teacher shortages, which mean that students aren't receiving the supports they need or the education they deserve. There are far too many days when students arrive at school and are sent to the library for the day because there is no teacher available, so no learning will take place. Teachers and staff who provide specific supports are being pulled from their assignments to cover classrooms instead, which means students don't get oral language instruction, or special education supports, or updated safety or psychological assessments. And most seriously of all, there are allegations of abuse and discrimination that are putting students and workers at risk. To give just one example out of many, following a violent incident in December 2022, a Ministry of Labour investigator found that student safety plans at that particular school had not been updated for years. The investigator also concluded that the system in place to deal with emergencies, which required teachers to leave the classroom to hand a card to another staff member or student, was ineffective. And what did the school do in response? They implemented a new system in which a cowbell should be rung if there is an emergency. A cowbell in a school with deaf students, deaf teachers, and deaf staff. Former students, parents, teachers, education workers, OSSTF, and others have called on the Minister of Education to please investigate and put a stop to these horrific conditions. He has ignored their pleas. There are no elected trustees here for parents to turn to. There is only the Minister. That's why we need the Auditor General to investigate as the only one who can compel some accountability and action from this Minister. Nous sommes ici ce matin pour demander à la vérificatrice générale d'examiner les écoles provinciales qui sont sous le contrôle direct du ministre de l'Éducation. Les étudiants, les parents, les enseignants et le syndicat ont soulevé des inquiétudes au sujet des conditions dans ces écoles maintes fois, mais le ministre ne les écoute pas. Ces étudiants sont parmi les plus vulnérables dans notre province. Il est inacceptable qu'ils soient forcés d'apprendre dans ces conditions. Et juste pour être clair, cette demande ne concerne pas le consortium Centre Jules Léger, qui est géré par un conseil élu et ne fait pas l'objet des mêmes allégations. So just to be very clear, this request does not include the consortium Centre Jules Léger, which is under the control of an elected school board and is not subject to the same allegations. And now I'm going to turn it over to Tamara Witcher, President of OSSTF District 30.
Hello. We've tried and tried to meet with the Deputy Minister and have been denied. We have tried to confront the senior management team to discuss these issues, to no avail. We have tried calling in the Ministry of Labour and the Treasury Board Secretariat, and nothing has happened. This has left us no choice but to come here today and share this with you. At the Provincial Schools, we are the experts in deaf and blind education. We provide services, resources, and educations to students who are deaf, blind, and deafblind. Many of us, as well, are deaf and blind. We have the same lived experiences as our students. We are the educators who ensure they have access to education. We ensure they develop the potential to become successful, and we provide the respect and dignity to these students. We care about them and their families. Although we believe that our schools are the best places for the deaf, blind, and deafblind, the government has starved us of funding, of resources, and staffing to the point that there are long-standing staffing crises. There is neglect from the top down, and we continue to try and provide the students with everything that we have, but we know that the students and families deserve so much more. Because of the system at provincial schools, there is no governance and no accountability. The people who make decisions have been allowed to continue neglecting us, despite our letters and our rallies to share our concerns. We have not seen any investment in our schools for many years by the government. And we serve many of Ontario's most vulnerable students. If we're not serving them, where do they go? There are students who want to come to our school, but they are denied admission due to a lack of staffing. And they may have some other special needs known as multiple exceptionalities. This means that these students are forced to remain at their schools for years. They are suffering without the supports that we could provide and are robbed of the chance to become successful in their futures. We continue to give the best education and the best services that no one else can receive. The best education, the best services, and the best resources none other can compare to. But we can only serve those who are currently enrolled in our schools. Others who wish to come in are not allowed. If we had a full staff complement, the resources and supports, we could allow others to come in. And the government needs to take accountability for this and provide the governance. We will continue to educate students who are deaf, blind, and deafblind. The provincial schools serve deaf and blind children from birth till they complete high school or until they turn 21. By providing important services and supports to them and their families. The wait list for deaf and blind babies is now 160 families and getting longer by the week. We used to have 35 preschool home visiting teachers, and unfortunately we now only have 15. So those families that are not receiving those supports are going to be impacted for life. And we know the reason for this is the lack of appropriate staffing. Unfortunately, the education, we know why there is a staffing crisis. While all the schools are experiencing staff shortages, the problem is even worse at provincial schools. We are required to have additional degrees and qualifications, but there is only one program in Ontario that provides Teacher of the Deaf certification, and they do not support our school. Another example is the deaf-blind qualifications program has not been offered since 2018, and who is going to be replacing those teachers for deaf-blind students in the future if the programs are not available? Our on-call supply teachers are not unionized and are the lowest paid of any school board in Ontario. For our teachers, requests for professional development, which is at the heart of teaching, are chronically denied due to inappropriate resources and inappropriate lack of staffing. They're denied. To get new equipment, we have to beg and wait many months in order to be turned down. The disrespect by the administrators is terrible. And the reason why we're here is because of how much we value our students. Any reports of discrimination and harassment are swept underneath the rug. All of these examples shows how zero investment in our schools affects the future of our students. We hope the Ministry of Education and the Deputy Minister will stop neglecting us and will listen to us, take our concerns seriously, discuss with us ways to resolve all of these issues and to take accountability. Thank you.
Now I'd like to invite Julian Abraham, who's the parent of a current student at one of these schools, to speak. Julian?
Good morning. I am the father of a 14-year-old currently enrolled in one of our provincial schools. As much as I wished it not be true, my journey as a parent has been marked with frustrations, disappointment, and a profound sense of injustice. It's been really hard. Our struggle began when we noticed that he was falling behind in school. We sought assessments for our son, and despite our persistence, Liam was put in an never-ending wait list. He was missing out on crucial intervention, and that could have helped him progress. Each delay felt like a gut punch. Watching Liam struggle in school and emotionally without the support he deserved. At one point, our son was 6 years behind, and there was no serious attempt to identify a cause. He was just allowed year after year to fall further behind, and we fought tirelessly to get him the help he needed. In my experience, the challenges, though, extend far beyond just getting our son assessed. We've seen firsthand the strain of on the school system with chronic staff shortages. It's not uncommon for our kids to go to class and realize that they won't have a teacher that day or even that week. I don't know if you can imagine having a 12-year-old that's 6 years behind reading at a grade 2 level, and there's no one in class to help him catch up. I do need to point out that these schools are more than buildings. They are sanctuaries for kids. They're a place where they can grow and thrive. They are a place where they are accepted and valued for who they are. They need to be protected, not dismantled. While I'm really grateful for all the dedicated individuals trying really hard and working within this system, it's evidence that more needs to be done to ensure that every child receives the supports they need to thrive. I'm tired of watching our son fall through the cracks and other kids like him. Every child deserves a chance to succeed. It's time for the system to step up and to do better, because our kids deserve nothing less. My son is also part of the future of this country. Thank you.
Good morning. I want to thank Julian for sharing that very personal story to begin. But I also want to thank Tamara for sharing what she has and what's happening on the front line. And I really hope that people are listening to what's happening in these schools. My name is Karen Littlewood. I'm the president of the Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation, representing over 60,000 hardworking frontline education workers, teachers, and occasional teachers, including the staff at Ontario's Provincial Schools, which offer specialized programming for students who are deaf, hard of hearing, blind, low vision, deaf-blind, and students who have learning disabilities. What we have heard today is just astounding and profoundly disappointing. These schools provide specialized programming unlike anything else offered in the province, and their students deserve a fully funded, high-quality education, as do all of the students in Ontario. It's clear that Premier Ford and Minister Lecce are failing these students and are perfectly fine with denying students their right to quality, enriching educational experience. Many people may not know just how incredible these schools and students are, and now their education is at risk because of the Ford government's staffing and funding cuts. But it doesn't have to be this way. How have we gotten here? Why are Premier Ford and Minister Lecce refusing to deal with these most serious and egregious issues? Parents, teachers, and support staff have begged, lobbied, and advocated for years now that the Ford government do something to help these students and fix their school buildings which have fallen into disrepair. There are no school boards or trustees to manage these schools. They fall directly under the Ministry of Education. Minister Lecce ultimately has full authority and responsibility for these students and the quality of their education. With a stroke of a pen, Minister Lecce could solve these issues. He could work with staff, listen to parents, students, and alumni, and develop a plan for solving these problems and getting students back on track, setting them up for success in the future, as he claims to care about. Yet Minister Lecce has done none of this. For years, the Ford government has let conditions worsen, simply hoping the issue would remain in the shadows. I want to thank Julian Abraham and local Provincial Schools Authority President and OSSTF member Tamara Witcher for speaking out today, for shining a light on this very serious issue. And thank you to the NDP and MPP Chandra Pasma as well for always supporting staff and students and for calling out and calling for an Auditor General investigation. Clearly, more transparency and accountability is desperately needed. Today is the culmination of repeated and sustained efforts by local OSSTF FEESO leaders and staff, parents, plus students, alumni, and their families to garner the attention of the ministry, Premier Ford. Minister Lecce, I sure hope you're listening. Students can't afford to have you ignore them any longer. And now we will take questions.
Stand by. We do have a call on the line. Hold on 1 second. Okay, going to calls now.
Please press star one should you have any questions. The first will come from Alan Hill at Queen's Park today. Please go ahead.
Hi there. So, to be clear, your attempts to contact the Deputy Minister going to Kate Manson-Smith, is that correct?
Yes, Kate is the Deputy Minister now at Education.
Okay, so what exactly happened with those efforts? Like, did she not respond at all? Did she, give you guys the runaround? When you say that she wouldn't meet with you or wouldn't talk to you, what exactly are you saying?
Thank you for your question. We have contacted the Deputy Minister and we were told to speak to others first to see if anything happened. We spoke to them and nothing happened. Then we came back to the Deputy Minister who didn't do anything and she has denied our request for meetings. Basically nothing has happened. We got the runaround.
Okay. Who did she tell you guys to talk to first?
She told us to contact our executive director.
Okay. So if you we're going to get that meeting with Manson-Smith, what exactly was the plan to ask her for? Did you have a proposal ready? What was the specific asks that you see are needed?
We want to share our issues that we've had ongoing for years and try and resolve them. They've just been lingering for too long, and it seems the Deputy Minister is not willing to have that sit down with us.
Can you be a bit more specific about what sort of things the government should be doing in this case? Did you have a list of things you wanted from her?
Our first issue is our lack of staff. We're required to have additional qualifications and additional degrees to teach at provincial schools. And so you need to have those qualifications to teach deaf and hard of hearing students or deaf-blind students. And unfortunately, those programs are not turning out a lot of graduates, including from the deaf-blind qualifications program, which leads to a lack of teachers and for succession. Other supply teachers are unionized, while our provincial school supply teachers are not. Also, they're the lowest paid, which makes it very difficult to have a complement of supply teachers. If a teacher is not at school, then we're not able to replace them with supply teachers. For even those teachers who do retire from the provincial schools, they are not willing to come back and work as supply teachers. We need the investment in our school. We need the resources to be provided and maintenance for our buildings, as you can see from some of these pictures. And for those who work in the front offices, they're sitting very pretty in their nice offices while we are suffering in the schools. Now, I just wanted to add one thing, if you don't mind.
Don't go for it.
Our students are vulnerable. They're deaf, blind, or deaf-blind. They require additional supports and resources to help them become successful in their future. So that's why I say we need to have that investment in the schools. If I wasn't provided that when I was coming up in the provincial schools, I wouldn't be the success that I am today. As well, to add, another example of providing respect and dignity to our students, there are students who are commuting long distances, up to 70 kilometers, to come to our schools. So our school, for one, is in Milton, coming from Scarborough in the morning. When they get to school, they're required to stand outside in the cold, snow, or rain for quite a while before they can come into the schools. They're not allowed in until 8:30. Some of them arrive at 8 o'clock in the morning and have to go to the washroom after that long commute. So they'll urinate outside in front of the school building because they can't wait any longer and they're not allowed in the schools. As a mom, I have 3 children myself, and I would be quite angry if my child had to urinate outside because they're not allowed in the school. What are we doing for our students?
I'm also curious about the cowbell anecdote. What specific school did this take place in? And is there more to that story about why they would choose the cowbell in a school for the deaf?
I would love to know why they chose a cowbell at a school for the deaf, but this was implemented only last year. And the administration and managers decided that that was going to be the ideal solution when there was an issue in a classroom to call for help. When we advised them and reminded them that half of our students and our staff are deaf, that using a cowbell is considered autism, they denied that. They said, oh, the cowbell is for us, it's not for you, so it's not autism. But we wanted to sit down with them to provide the best feedback. They weren't interested. And the Deputy Minister is very well aware of this, and the cowbell is still being used today. It's still, 1 year later, still there. And that's just one example of discrimination and just the non-dignity that they provide to us.
Can you specify what school this is in?
It's at Ernest C. Drury Elementary School in Milton.
Okay, thank you. If you don't hear back from Lecce or his deputy minister after this, what do you think that says?
I think it says that we're not important. We're substandard, second-class citizens to them, and the continued neglect will just continue. We're used to the neglect, but we feel like we have to call attention to this, to the public. They need to know what's happening in our schools. And we're going to continue to raise awareness until a solution is put in place. And any solutions have to be decided upon with feedback from the deaf, blind, and deafblind staff. Policies, education, anything that's being implemented should be in consideration with feedback from the staff as well.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you. Next question on the line from Snay Dougal at the Trillium. Please go ahead.
Hi, good morning. My first question was just regarding the call for an Auditor General, for the Auditor General to do an investigation. I'm wondering if you can speak a bit more about what you're hoping to have come out of that. It seems like this has been something, staff have been talking about, you've been raising or trying to raise with the government. What are you hoping would come out of such an investigation?
Thanks, Snay. Maybe maybe I'll start and then turn it over to Tamara if she wants to add anything. Parents, staff, teachers, alumni have been raising concerns about these provincial schools for years. There have been multiple lawsuits against the government for abuse and discrimination at these schools. And Minister Lecce and Premier Ford have not listened. They have not listened to the parents, they have not listened to the staff, they have not listened to the students and alumni. The Auditor General is in a unique position within our system in that they are in many ways the ultimate buck stop for accountability and transparency within the province. An Auditor General audit of these schools will naturally attract public attention. The Auditor General can also put forward recommendations about what needs to be done to fix the situation, to make sure that every child is getting the education that they deserve, the education that the Education Act in Ontario says that they should be getting, that their rights around accessibility are being respected under the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. And those recommendations can become a roadmap for a government that has clearly not been interested in supporting children with disabilities in the province to receive the education that they deserve. Tamara, did you want to add anything?
I would like to add, yes. Unfortunately, our school system is not working the way it is right now. There is no board of trustees, and I believe some kind of governance and accountability needs to be put in place, because currently no one is taking that responsibility. There needs to be further education for people to become teachers of the deaf or teachers of the deafblind. Investment needs to be made into our schools. The Education Act apparently that says that supply teachers are not allowed to be unionized. That needs to be amended. You have to provide students with what they need: textbooks, extracurricular equipment. They're vulnerable students. They need to be given what they need so that they can finish school and move on to post-secondary education and become successful citizens, as opposed to becoming dependent on social assistance. If I want to know that when I become older and I need to be cared for by the province, someone's going to be able to communicate with me. And if we have our students grow up to be successes, that will happen. So we depend on investments into our education, publicly funded education, to ensure the correct resources are given to our students.
Okay, thank you. And I'm wondering if you can give us a sense of how many students are we talking about at these schools? And I think you had mentioned a wait list of 160 babies. Is there more to that, or is there also a wait list for older children to join these schools? Can you just give us a sense of the numbers?
Yes, please let me clarify. There are 4 provincial schools in Ontario. One of them is a school for blind and deafblind. Our waiting list is for infants till school-age children. When they're identified as infants, they have to receive the preschool supports, resources, the beginnings of communication to be taught with them, so that once they reach school age, they're able to continue on with their education. And that is what we have currently, a waiting list of 160 families to get that basic beginning information. Unfortunately, we have students coming into school with no language, and that impacts them for life because they haven't had the opportunity to be where their peers are when going into school. Children who are deaf or blind or deafblind need to bond with their families, have communication, and be ready to learn once they enter the education system. I believe there are 170 students who are low vision or blind throughout the province, approximately. And within the deaf schools, the provincial schools, there are about 150 to 200 students who are deaf. And a lot of those students are also in the school boards and the regular schools, but denied entrance into our schools. So when they're there, quite often they're very isolated as the only deaf, blind, or deafblind student in that school, without friends, without supports or access to their education, because they don't have any specialized teachers to educate them.
Okay, and I think my last question for Julian, thanks for sharing your story. I was just wondering if you could speak a bit more to specifically for your child, like what else you think could help, and what are your concerns long term for your child not getting the support that you feel they need and should be getting currently?
Well, just to add to what Tamara was just saying, the problem for my son is that he had very little access to language before he started going to these schools. We did have the home visiting program, which helped, but there are things that hearing parents like me can't take on for our kids because we just don't have the language to teach them. So we rely 100% on support and the province to help us kind of fill in that gap. So then after that, it's really hard to pinpoint something because everything is connected. It is systemic. When you look in one direction and you think, okay, we're going to deal with this issue, for example, the assessments, then it gets compounded with the fact that, okay, if my son does get an assessment, then what? The teachers are not even in the classroom to deal with the recommendations that the assessments put forth. So there needs to be a kind of top-down approach and deal with everything because there's so many of these things that are just not in place right now. And there's no options for us. That's also very important to understand. I can't work extra hard and put my kid in a good private school. It does not exist. So if these schools are failing our kids, my only option is to watch my son being failed. There's nothing I can do myself, and it's a position that I wish on no parents, is to be completely incapable of doing anything. I completely rely on this system, and it's been failing us. I don't know what else to tell you, really.
Thank you. That's all for me.
No more calls.
Okay, thank you very much.